All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to another NFL 2020 team preview video. Today we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens. We're now in the AFC North. We concluded the AFC East with the last video on the New York Jets, so you can go back and watch those. I'm going to make a playlist that you can check out on the channel where once we get every single team done, you'll be able to view all 32 NFL teams, and they will all be previewed for this upcoming season. Fingers crossed that we still get one. All right, so today's team focus is the Baltimore Ravens. After a 12-game winning streak to end the regular season last year, they had a disappointing playoff performance and were eliminated immediately, which is something I don't think a lot of people saw coming. But, you know, if you watch the game, it looked like Mark Ingram was a little worn out, and the offense just wasn't ready to deal with the atmosphere of the first round of the playoffs this year. And as sour of a note as that was, to lose that game, I think Ravens fans have a lot to look forward to. This team may have not been ready to go all the way last year, but it's still a very good, very young, very talented team, and this defense on paper looks completely unfair, especially with the free agent acquisitions that they've made this past offseason. So real quick, let's recap 2019. They were 14-2 overall, made the playoffs. Offense was ranked 2nd in the league, 27th in passing, 1st in rushing. Defense was ranked 4th in the league, 6th against the pass, 5th against the rush. John Harbaugh enters his 13th season with a career record of 118-74. The snapshot of the last 4 years: 2018 they went 10-6, made the playoffs. 2017 they went 9-7. 2016 they went 8-8, and in 2015 they went 5-11. So a steady increase in wins over the last 5 years for the Baltimore Ravens, getting a little bit better each time. And now it looks like they're poised to make a Super Bowl run. And honestly, if I was a betting man or wanted to make some early predictions, the Ravens would be a hard one to shy away from as a potential Super Bowl contender for this year. And I know the Chiefs exist, and I know that they're in the same conference, and I know that that is going to be a big hurdle for them to climb. They have to play in the postseason the same way they do in the regular season if they want to achieve the ultimate goal, and that is a Super Bowl trophy. Looking at the projected depth chart for this year, as I said, I believe that this defense is scary good and completely unfair on paper. So we'll start with the defense. Probably one of the better defensive lines in the NFL, with Calais Campbell, Williams, and Derek Wolfe coming over in free agency. Campbell has been one of the better interior pass rushers in the league, and this is absolutely going to be a really great fit for him. Wolfe on the other side gives them another great person up front. And with the linebacking crew, it's a little bit of a transition with a couple of veterans leaving by free agency, but I think they handled this position pretty well. You've got second-year player Jalen Ferguson, Patrick Queen, who they got in the first round of this previous draft. Jake Ryan, I forget, I'm suddenly confused. Ryan is also in there, and Matthew Judon has with the other position. I'm stumbling over my words already. In the secondary, you've got Marcus Peters, Earl Thomas, Chuck Clark, and Marlon Humphrey, one of the better secondaries also in the league. Earl Thomas maybe not be the same player that he was when he was in Seattle, but he can still get after it. And of course, Marcus Peters and Humphrey are used in a dynamic way where they switch off and trade against primary targets throughout the game, and always keeping fresh legs on the opposing team's best wide receiver. This defense on paper is scary. I love Patrick Queen. I know people are going to say he's a little bit smaller than the position may require, but I think Patrick Queen coming out of LSU is maybe not as good as Devin White was when he came out, but I still think he's a very solid player at the linebacker position, and he's going to be a force to be reckoned with for years to come, especially in this division that plays really hard defense. Moving over to offense, we have the offensive line bookended by Ronnie Stanley and Orlando Brown, two very good tackles. The interior offensive line is going to be a little bit of a question mark because Yanda has retired. And as you noticed, that was one of my top 3 storylines over here in the corner, how the interior offensive line plays this year. And I sound like a broken record every time I say this, but coming from somebody that is a Vikings fan, let me tell you, the interior offensive line is so important. So don't sleep on this as they bring in Bozeman and Powers for the guard positions, and Sakura is, I believe, a 4-year starter at the center position, so that should be just fine. Lamar Jackson returns for another year at the quarterback position, where he dominates on the ground. He's got to do a little bit better in the air, despite me sticking up for him all the time about that he can be a quarterback and he can unleash and he can complete accurate throws. We got to do better than 27th in passing, and I want to give him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt that the receiving core didn't play up to what I would consider to be standard NFL football last year, and people will probably disagree with me on that, because I even remember last year going into training camp, the most experienced wide receiver they had on the roster at the time was Willie Snead, and I thought, man, that's not good enough. So speaking of wide receivers, we have Boykin and Hollywood Brown. Mark Andrews is the tight end. The wide receiver core has some good pieces this year, but I think the two most prominent players that need to step up are going to be Boykin and Brown. And I know Hollywood Brown was had a little setback last year dealing with his injuries, but this should be the year that they open things up in the passing game. And you know, they're going to do what they need to do on the ground. They've still got Ricard as the fullback. Mark Ingram is here. They drafted J.K. Dobbins this year. They still have Gus Edwards and Justice Hill. So they have a pretty diversified backfield in terms of skills and talents. But I wouldn't expect them to go as heavy with Mark Ingram during the regular season as they did, you know, with 200-plus carries. He looked a little bit worn out in the playoff game, so I would expect this to be a more, not so much running back by committee, but carries getting spread out a little bit more, and maybe they save Mark Ingram for a little bit later in the season. So that is a look at the projected depth chart, and I really like this team. If everything gels together, this is going to be a team that is going to be tough to beat. And looking at the schedule, they've got a lot of teams that they should, you know, they should do what they need to do against teams that are not as good as them and beat them. So the first half of the schedule, and I do want to point out that I've made a little bit of a change. Instead of drawing that stupid @ symbol to signify away games, the away games are just now in red. So blue games are home. Red teams are away. So we've got the Browns at home to open the season, Texans on the road, Chiefs at home, Washington on the road, Bengals at home, Eagles on the road, Steelers at home, Colts on the road. Now, if you'll notice, until week 15 and 16, it's every other week this team is on the road or at home. So there's no back-to-back home games until the end of the season. And in my mind, that is difficult. But at the same time, this is a team that's very well built, very well coached. They should be able to handle it, at least that adversity, pretty well. Starting off the season with the Browns at home is one of the more intriguing matchups early on in the season, just because you're looking at the Browns, who we're going to cover in a few days, and they should be more improved with Kevin Stefanski as their new head coach, implementing his new offensive scheme. And I'm very curious to see how that goes up against, because the Browns have a pretty decent offensive line, especially now that they've got Jedrick Wills this year, and how is it going to fare against this defensive line, which is pretty intimidating. So the Browns and Ravens game to start the season is going to be one of the more marquee matchups, at least in my opinion, to see where both teams are at the beginning of the season. The Texans, they should be able to roll pretty easily. Not pretty easily. There's nothing given, you know, in the NFL, but I don't see the Texans being hyper competitive this year because Deshaun Watson is going to have to really carry this team on his back, and somebody's going to have to step up for the departed DeAndre Hopkins this year. Chiefs at home is a tough game. Washington on the road, they should beat them. Bengals, they should win. The Eagles are in a little bit of a flux right now, so I believe that's either a trap game or a game that they could win. Steelers is a tough contest. The Colts should be a tough contest on the road. If that was a home game, I'd probably give them the W right there. Second half of the season, they get the Patriots on the road. That's tough. Titans at home, that's tough. Steelers on the road, that's tough. Cowboys at home, Browns on the road, Jaguars, Giants, and Bengals back-to-back. Now, depending on how the Browns are doing at that point in the season, this could be a nice 4-game stretch for them to end out the season if they need some key victories to get into the playoffs. So by this time, week 14, we'll probably have a better idea of what the fate is of the Ravens season this year. If they need wins to get in, maybe things haven't gone so well with the tough schedule. You know, you've got the Chiefs, the Patriots, the Titans, Steelers twice every year. And the Steelers are probably going to be a lot better this year than they were last year. So it's not an easy schedule by any means for the Ravens. I don't think any NFL schedule really is. But considering all the circumstances that we've talked about, this could be a little bit tougher than they had last year. And I've touched briefly on the top 3 storylines that I have for the Ravens this year: the interior offensive line, how that's going to pan out. Running back workload, I mentioned that briefly with Mark Ingram's carries and how he looked a little deflated at the end of the season. And then the last 3 for the top storylines is just a personal one that I want to follow, and that's how they used James Prochet this year, one of the wide receivers that they drafted late in the season. Watching his tape, I used pretty intriguing prospect and how they could use him in this offense in a number of ways where they get him the ball in open space, and he does what he does best, and that's find the end zone. I think it could be a more dynamic offense for Lamar Jackson in the passing game this year. Now that he has, Hollywood Brown should be better, having had more time to recoup from his injury. Boykin has a good pedigree, and James Prochet has a lot of skills that I find very intriguing. So, yeah, the outlook for this year overall for the Ravens should be pretty good. We should see a lot of what we saw last year, and they should get back to the playoffs with some relative ease. So that's going to do it for this preview of the Baltimore Ravens for the 2020 season. Hope you join me in the next one. Next video, we're going to do the Pittsburgh Steelers.